Hi, my name is Patricia Nelson, and I am a student of Dr. Jaegoo Lee in the class of Human Behavior and Social Environment. The title of my paper is A Multidimensional Timeline and Self-Reflection Analysis of Significant Life Events in Relationships to Personal Environment, Perspective, and Time and Environment. This research study was completed using a multidimensional timeline of self-reflection of significant life events that happened in my own personal life. Self-reflection, as you know, is a good strategy in understanding the biological, psychological, and social dimensions of an individual's problems. It also helps provide a better understanding of a person in environmental perspective. I expect that this research paper will help anyone who aspires to be a social worker recognize the events that what has happened in their life so that they may use appropriate prevention and intervention strategies. My two significant events involve around my grandmother's death and having a child at the age of 39. My grandmother's death, just to give you a little background, I was raised in a multi-generational situation which included my great-grandparents, my grandmother and mother, and two siblings. By my teenage years, I was living at home with my grandmother because my mother and two siblings had moved out. My great-grandparents had passed. I was comfortable, very comfortable, and all my needs were being met by my grandmother. However, during my first year at JSU, grandmother died. To add insult to injury, I discovered I was 6 months pregnant. Being financially unstable, I was looking for relief. I started smoking marijuana occasionally, not all the time, but of course this was a marijuana age, so it was big on looking for relief in different forms of marijuana. I felt like I needed a break, so I dropped out of school. Because I dropped out of school, I became depressed, and of course after the baby I had postpartum depression. At that time I felt hopeless, depressed, I felt insecure. I had no one to help me with the baby. I felt like it was impossible at this time to return to school. My other event was giving birth at the age of 39 years old. Giving birth at the age of 39 years old, I'm planning pregnancy. Husband had recently taken a job, working on railroad, spending most of his time going from state to state, very limited support with 3 children. I fell again into postpartum depression and resentment for my husband not being there to help me out. Even though my husband was away from home, working to provide for our family, I felt resentful toward him for not being able to be there to help me with 3 children. I assumed that after I got married that I would have all this help, that I would be having a house, a picket fence. We would be doing things together. That was my idea of having a marriage, and I came to find out it was anything but that. And then on top of that, childhood made it very challenging, especially during this, I guess you would call it developmental stage if you wanted to. Anyway, my significance in my 4 development dimensions throughout this semester, we learned how to review the biological, psychological, social, psychosocial, and spiritual model as an important tool in assessing clients. I will review these 3 dimensions in relationship to my 2 significant events: my grandmother's death. The biological aspect is that I had no physical or medical disabilities, but I occasionally self-medicated with marijuana use, weight loss, and poor nutritional habits. My psychological aspects, I became concerned about the outward appearance experienced mild depression. I had postpartum depression after having a baby. My attitude was negative. I was withdrawn, filled with aggression about my grandmother dying. Felt worthless, like I had no one to impress anymore. In my psychosocial development, I became withdrawn. I developed mistrust for friends, relationships, very little social support, impulsive behavior, a drastic change in economic status, and I had to live uncomfortable with relatives. Spiritually, I was very actively involved in my church and church-related activities, but then I started to neglect church obligations, declined in my faith. I eventually gained control of my spirituality and started to regain my obligations to church. Having a baby at 39. My biological aspects of this was it impacted my daily functioning, not using substance, no major illness, developed severe insomnia and fatigue, hospitalization due to dehydration, and then I discovered that I had Meniere's disease a few years after having my last child. Time and environmental dimensions. Time and environmental dimensions such as micro, macro, and meso are considered three main social work practices according to Hutchinson 2015. The micro level refers to social worker practice that is performed with the individual or family. It focuses on one-on-one interaction and helping others through social, emotional, or health-related struggles. Individuals who struggle with addiction, marital problems, family and housing issues could benefit from a micro level practice. The macro level social work practice addresses large-scale issues such as problems that may affect the entire community, society, or systems. The meso level of social work practice directly focus on working with smaller groups such as schools, religious centers, organizations, neighborhood programs to promote change. In the first event, I was forced into an insecure environment. I haven't lived securely with my grandmother. During the 1980s, going to college was viewed as relating this perspective to the event. I will identify the possible impacts of micro, macro, and meso dimensions. Taking into consideration of the emotional and social factors of the first event, the micro level social work could be the best practice to address the first event. In relation to my grandmother's death, the personal one-on-one nature of this practice could have been beneficial in helping with the grief process, substance use, and depression. I was 19 years old and assumed a female gender role that I was born with. This psychosocial development stage is known as identity and role confusion stage. Her death took place in a natural environment due to natural causes. In 1980, there were no significant events taking place in society that impacted my situation that needed to be addressed on the meso or micro level. A micro social worker could have assisted me in obtaining independence and a more comfortable living arrangement suitable for my daughter and myself. Individual counseling could have addressed the identity and role confusion issue that I experienced in relation to this stage. In reference to my second event in 1998, I was a month away from being 40 years old. And according to Anna and Shemaiah 2015 interpretation of the development stage, at the age of 39, I should have been rearing teenage children, developing adult leisure time activities, and rediscovering my husband as a person again. In the Hutchinson 2015 textbook, they identified this period of life as a middle adulthood dimension of human behavior. In rounding up the age of 40 years old, the psychosocial development stage that relates to me is the general activity and stagnation stage. I was supposed to be at a time when I was contributing something to society, working to leave behind a legacy. However, I didn't feel as if I was being productive. During this incident, my husband had to work away from home for weeks at a time due to a series of railroad incidents, and he was usually from state to state. This factor did have an impact on my experience in giving birth without spousal support. A micro social worker could have been beneficial in helping to resolve marital and family issues surrounding my situation. Individual practice could have addressed postpartum depression, and a social worker could have provided resources to help increase my coping skills in handling the household by myself. Application to the NASW Code of Ethics. Shortly after becoming, a mother, doing my last child, I allowed a neighbor to come over and help me do a little light housekeeping, laundry, sometimes on the weekends. I later discovered that she was being investigated for child abuse and neglect from working at a local daycare facility. I initially had thoughts of pretending that I didn't know about the allegation because she was such a big help assisting me around the house. Additionally, she needed the money since she had been laid off for the daycare. The Social Work Ethical Responsibility Code 1.06 Conflict of Interest states that a social worker should be alert to avoid conflicts of interest that interfere with the exercise of professional discretion and impartial judgment. Social workers should inform clients when a real or potential conflict of interest arise and reasonable steps to resolve the issue in a manner that makes the client interest primary and protects the client's interest to the greatest extent possible. In some cases, protecting the client interest may require termination of a professional relationship with proper referral of the client. Therefore, I made the decision to terminate the personal service from my neighbor was providing for me. I explained to her why I could no longer be in a dual relationship with her. Reflection. In reflecting on timeline, I worked with a client who had experienced similar situations such as my two events discussed earlier in the paper. What made us different is that she did not make any effort to change her situation when it first occurred. For example, I entered the military reserves as a way to help me gain stability and have a career at the same time for my daughter and myself. Also, I made strong efforts to control my depression so that I could not become frustrated or abuse and neglect my children. I tried to encourage the client to seek the same opportunities to improve her situation. However, she refused to comply with any of my suggestions or practice coping skills to ensure that she would not lose her children to state's custody. I became frustrated and had to try very hard to manage my personal biases or discriminations. There were so many times I wanted to discharge her for non-compliance of the treatment goals, but I didn't. As I continue to grow in my profession, I've learned that everything happens in due time, and not everyone is as resilient as I was at the time. Today, still being classified in the middle adulthood stage of behavior. I think I'm more resilient and determined to find balance now for my children. Instead of being depressed, I sometimes panic and worry excessively. I did not utilize my professional help in helping me deal with these issues. Therefore, I spent a lot of time being miserable and frustrated for nothing. Now my entire focus is on my family, working to help others and avoid the pitfalls that I experienced. The self-assessment of the factors and knowledge about myself that I have to close is how I should map out a future client's issue in order to organize an effective approach working with them. Through this whole timeline and self-assessment, I found like this is a great way to kind of see yourself, kind of help others understand that when you do an examination of yourself, even this timeline, it helps you work through some of the issues and help you kind of see yourself. And working with people sometimes just letting people know that kind of do a self, be disclose things about yourself, help people understand that it's not just them. It's just not about them. It's about everybody has issues. This self-assessment has educated me, and I found out a lot of things about myself that I really didn't know. A lot of things that I had buried deep down inside. A lot of things that I thought I had forgotten about. I think it helped me, and what I learned from is that I'm gonna take this and use the same tool to help work with the clients that I serve on a daily basis. Thank you.